All right, so I want to go over a couple more things with Maya, UV, Substance, and Unreal. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to cover every single thing that every single person's going to do, so I'm just going to kind of hit a bunch of familiar topics, and obviously something will apply to your stuff, and then other stuff we can kind of fill in the holes. So I'm not in my other file. I could go in there, but for right now, I'm just going to stay in here. I'm going to show how you can create some other things that you may want to add to your scene. Let me close that window. There we go. So some stuff you may want to have, like let's say you have something where you want like a piece of cloth or something kind of draped over another item. This is a simple thing you can do and adds a lot of detail to it. So eventually what we're going to end up with is we can do like paper, like kind of wadded up paper. This is the same process. You can do like a towel draped. You can do a flag kind of folded. There's a million different ways you can do this. Eventually you're going to have to put a texture on there. So you want to make sure the UVs are laid out before you do anything further. This is a polygon plane. Default, they're already set up. Okay. Now if I were to go like this, now they're not set up. Okay, because I just distorted it. Right? So if I turn on my UVs, there it is, you'll see that they become all squishied. So I'm going to add my divisions. I'll create the shape that I want. So I'm going to go with, let's say, 50, and that's too many. Let's go with 20 and 30. That looks good. Okay. So I'm going to try to get these kind of square, maybe 25 here. No, 15 here. There we go. So these, if I go to wireframe, look pretty square. Anytime you do anything with cloth, you want to make sure that all your faces are square. It makes your surface turn out a lot nicer. Then I'm going to lay out the UVs. Now this one is pretty simple because the UVs are already flat. We just need to adjust it for the new proportions. So if I grab the shell, shift right click, do an unfold, there it is, didn't change. And then I do a layout. Again, same settings we've talked about before. Give this a second. Calculating. You'll see that nothing changed. Nothing changed because I forgot one of the rules we have to do, which is freeze our transforms. That gets rid of all of our scales. Now Maya will recognize that this is not a square surface. And now unfold will do the correct thing. There we go. And then orient will do that, and then layout will do that. It'll line it up and get it locked right in there. Okay, so freeze transform, I didn't do that. Delete history, and then I can do all my stuff. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to delete my history on this, and it's all good, all locked in. I should probably let you verify that, yes, we do have squares on our UVs now, which is obviously what we want. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to duplicate this just in case I need it again. I'm going to throw it off to the side. And under the FX menu, you'll find a bunch of dynamic stuff. One of them is cloth, and it can be used for a lot of things, not just cloth. You can use it for flags. You can use it for just like creating a garbled mess, jello kind of things. It's pretty awesome. So I'm going to go to Create End Cloth. This creates a cloth object. Once I have that, I can't click and drag in the timeline. I have to hit play. So I'm just going to hit play. At the scale that we have our scene at, this is playing back at real time. Okay, so if we want this to fall faster, we would have to increase things like gravity or the weight of the object or other forces. So I'm going to give myself plenty of frames here so this can fall down. I'm also going to lock in some of these points. So let's say that I grabbed this point, this point, this point. Come on, baby. This point, this point. So I'm grabbing like every other point. Oh. And I'll also grab that point too. And then I'm going to go up to End Constraint and say Transform Constraint. Okay, now what that does, it locks in those points so that when I hit play, what should happen is those points are going to stay there and all the rest of it is just going to fall. So if we had something like a curtain or something, those points would be locked and everything else is falling down. All right, this is going to go super slow, so I'm going to speed it up. In the attribute editor, when you do a cloth object, you get the nucleus. This is kind of like the physics. How everything is going to move in the scene is based off of this. You get the end cloth, which is the properties of that specific item. So whether it's denim or silk or silly putty or lava, all the features of what kind of cloth material is what that is. So I'm going to go into the nucleus, and I'm going to go down to my time attributes, my scale attributes, and I'm going to set my time scale to like 50 because I want this to go a lot faster. Let me scoot that over, let me rewind, let me hit play. All right, 50 was a little bit too out there. Let's go, I'll set it to 10 and we'll see if that works better. I'm also going to right click and make sure that my playback speed is set to play every frame. Oops. Actually, I'll go play every frame free. There we go. So now this is falling obviously a lot faster. And then you can see it's like super slow motion as far as how this is doing this. Now, with something like dynamics, you can always simulate it very small, especially if you're doing like a flag or something. Once you get the shape of it, because we're only dealing with stills, you could always just copy it and scale it up to whatever size you want. Okay? So this is going like crazy slow still. Let me take my scale. Yep. I tried to type in 25, I typed in 0.25. There we go. All right, that's still going like crazy slow. Let's go back to the 1 here. I'm going to lower my space scale, which is the next item down. And maybe this will go a lot faster. There we go. That's much better. All right, so I'm going to lower that even further. Whoa. That's exactly what I was after. I don't know what it's doing. I went too low on that apparently. 0.2, let's try that. I think I'm going to increase my gravity too, so I'm just going to go up to the gravity area that's over there and just make that 50. Still doing that same thing. It's so weird. All right, space scale, you go back to 1. Gravity is at 50. There we go. Yes, okay, it's falling down. So I didn't like that space scale being where it was. Okay, now the more divisions you have in this, the slower it's going to go. But the more resolution you're going to have. You can't really do this at a really low resolution and then make it look smooth and still get the same kind of like rippling effect that you may want. Now what's cool about dynamics is you can just like hit play, watch it, let it do its thing, and then when you get to a spot where you like it, you just stop it and like that's the frame you're going to use. Oh no, you're flipping over. You silly thing. All right. I'm going to animate this thing because I want this to actually condense like curtains would. Okay, so I'm going to animate this scaling in. If I just scaled it, it would freak out. Okay, so I'm going to set some keyframes for the scale here at 1. I'm going to middle click to about 100 and then scale this down to maybe 0.5 and then key that again. And then now as I hit play, you'll see how it's kind of like squishing in together and then it should be falling down. Okay, I'm also going to, let me rewind this a bit. I'm going to go into the attribute editor for that, and I'm going to go and edit some of these. There's a million different settings in here for what the cloth is actually looking like and how it's interacting with stuff. The easiest way for beginners to do this is go to the presets and start here. So these are all different preset settings for what kind of cloth you're dealing with. So something like this, I may go to silk, let's say, and go to replace, and it'll go through here and replace the settings for what silk would be doing, how silk would move. So I rewind hit play again, and then let it go. And now you'll see we're getting a lot more like rippling inside here than we had before. Before it was a bit stiffer of a fabric. And then we just let it continuously flow down. I really need to increase the gravity or something. I can't watch it do that. Time scale, let's go 10. Yes, ma'am.
So could you make like a thicker fabric, like a wool, where it's not too dense?
You can. So every time you do any kind of fabric, we want to simulate it as like just a paper thin plane. Once we're done and we have it, then we'll extrude it to give it the actual thickness. All right, I'm going to simulate this as a different file. This is going way too slow for anything. There we go. So we're going to keep it like this, and then I will just make it bigger later. So I'm going to go like that, like this. Add some divisions here. That's good. Let's freeze transform. Let's use the UV editor. Let's unfold it. Let's orient it. Let's lay it out. The layout process seems to always take forever. There's no fast layout process. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to duplicate this again. Delete history. All right. So let's do this again. So create end cloth. Hit play. Oops. That's how fast I want to be able to simulate this. Good. Much better. Now, if I was smart, I would have put the right amount of divisions in here, but I did not. So I'm just going to go here, there, there, and there. And then I will do a transform constraint. I will click on my transform constraint, go to my scale, set a key, scooch up a little bit, scale this in a little bit, 0.25. Key that. Give me more frames, and then hit play. There we go. That's how fast I want to be able to preview this. Let me reset my cloth now to silk. Hit play again. There we go. Okay, so I like that shape. That's what I want to go with. So I'm just going to duplicate it when I like it. Now it's free to move around. I can use this as a whatever kind of shape. Okay. This one I can use to calculate other stuff. So I may want to have maybe some constraints on this side too. So I'm going to go to transform constraint. I'm going to grab my previous one and I'm going to delete the keyframes on this. And I'm just going to animate this one scooting into that one. If I hit play, you'll see how we get, what? I deleted those keyframes. Maybe I added more keyframes. There we go. We get this, which is okay, but it's kind of boring. I'm going to scoot both of these in more and get kind of like a canopy and scale them at the same time. So grab both of those, scale that, middle click around 60, shrink this in, 0.5 would be good. There we go. Go back to the beginning, go to translate X, scale this, or key that. And then go here to 59, and I'm just going to, come on. It's not letting me select them, I'm not sure why. Okay, now it's not updating because it doesn't like live update. Because it's dynamic, it has to calculate. So I just have to know that it's going to do that kind of thing, and then I have to tweak it from there. So I'm going to hit play. There we go. So now we have this kind of canopy type thing. So I can then take this shape and then duplicate it and then scoot that over. If I don't want the constraints on there, I can just go into the outliner and delete them, and now they're gone. Hit play, and it falls down. On the nucleus, there is a ground plane you can add. So if I grab the cloth, scooch this up, and then hit play, it'll fall down and hit the ground. Now that doesn't look very exciting, but if I were to rotate it, make sure it's above the ground, give it a little bit of an angle here, hit play again, I get a crumpled up piece of fabric that I could then duplicate and then hit undo. And now I have basically like 3 different things I can add to my scene very quickly. The UVs are already laid out. They're already like little detail pieces. Very easily just add them into my scene. Now your question, what if we want some thickness, okay? So let's go to the easy one first. I mean, they're all the same, but this one's gonna be more obvious. We could extrude this. So I just hit Control E. I'm gonna give it a little bit of thickness. So, oops. I'm at a smaller scale, so my numbers are a lot smaller. When you get into cloth extruding, it'll do that, okay? Like thickness typically doesn't do that, but obviously in this case, it's just gonna be crazy. So I'm gonna extrude it. I'm gonna grab the blue and then just use that instead of the other one, and then I don't get an issue. And let me just squish that in a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so now it has that look. Now we'll also need to look at some stuff, like this one isn't too bad here. Let's see what the other ones look like after we do this. I'm gonna extrude this, push that up, there we go, good. Let's go here, let's extrude. There we go. Okay, now in this case you can see we actually have maybe some intersection happening. One piece of the fabric is kind of sticking through that. So if I go to my vertices and I click on them, I can just move them around to get them not to stick through. So I may have to play with the direction that they're at to get them not to do that. The other thing I can do is, let me hit undo before I did the extrude. There we go. Is do it at this point so that it becomes a lot easier. I'm going to use my mesh tools. There we go. I'm going to use my sculpting tool, and I'm going to use my smooth tool. And the way this works is I need to double click, shrink the size down so I can see it. There it is. And then I just click and drag, and you'll see how it just smooths it out. It's much nicer. There we go. Good. Good. Okay. Now there's other tools inside there too you can use. Whoops, not there. So you could do things like sculpting, so you can grab stuff too, like if you wanted, you know, this over here, you can just kind of grab stuff and smooth it out. B and then middle mouse button drag. You can also use the Photoshop hotkeys. Nope, you can't, I lied. That's a different software package. I'm sure you guys, bless you, have found out that it's very difficult to keep all your hotkeys short between softwares. Cool. All right, so that looks pretty good. Then I'll extrude that and then give it some thickness. And there we go. Now, an issue we might run into. This piece of fabric that's right here, it has 2 sides to it. The UVs are laid out for both sides, essentially, but we don't have, if we were to take this into Unreal, we're going to get some issues because they're on top of each other. So I'm going to go to this one first so we can see it. Let's look at the UVs. Wrong window. There we go. There it is. So they're right on top of each other. So I'm going to go into my edge mode. I'm going to double click the edge all the way around. Like so. I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to grab one of the corners here that are connecting them. So there's a plane here, a plane there, and then there's a strip that runs around the entire thing holding them together. Somewhere that strip has to be cut. So I'm just picking a random edge and then cutting it. Not there, in here. Then I'll grab everything, and then I'll do my unfold, and then I'll do my layout. I froze transform before I did anything dynamic. That's the only time I needed to do that. Yep. All right, so I'm still missing a piece. Like that edge piece is not here, so I got to find out where that went and why it didn't separate. Most likely I missed an edge, or I'm just not seeing it. Let's go to shell. Click it here. Oh, there it is. So this shell edge didn't lay out. It's just like bunched up into a ball. So I'm going to go to UV. Oops. I'm going to say cylindrical. That will project it kind of funky. That's fine. And then I'm going to unfold it. There it goes. And then I can grab that with all my other stuff. I want to cut this some more. It's not cut enough. There. So I'm going to cut that there. And I'll probably cut it here before it starts doing this wiggly thing. All right, that should be good. We'll see. Remember, our goal is to make sure that this has filled the entire area and we don't have any, like, you know, a lot of unnecessary unused space. All right, so we really lost a lot of space in here, so let me do the orient. There we go, and then do the layout. And this should lay out a lot nicer. There we go, much bigger, much better. And then that will come into Unreal much nicer, come into Substance nicer if we decide to take it in there. So that same process I would do for all of these. So go through, grab any of these edges here. Whoops. This. Come on, this. I'm going to cut this up here too, right where along the top, right of the other one. Probably there, yep. And do the same thing on the bottom here. And it doesn't have to be perfectly like at this corner or that corner. We're just trying to get it close to where the big shape changes happen. Okay, so cut, grab my shells, unfold everything. There's that piece, there's that piece. And then right in here, that's probably the little one. So I just do a cylindrical, and then unfold it. Just gave me two pieces. Nope, there's still a tiny piece. It's hard to see, it's right there. I just missed that one. Come on. Cylindrical again. And all cylindrical does when I do that is just give me just some default starting point to go with. I don't know where it went, it just disappeared. So I'm going to reselect these and recylinder them. And a quick way to do that, if I just marquee everything, and then I control marquee those two faces, it makes it a lot easier to select all the pieces. There they are. Okay. And I just have to recut these. Cut there. Cut there. And I'll do the same thing here. I'm just going to cut right at the corners. Whoops, that's not the corner. That's the corner. All right, so now we'll grab everything, unfold it, orient it, and then lay it out. Excellent. I think I could probably rotate this one or rotate that one and get maybe a better layout. Let's try that. For our first one, it's not a huge deal if they're not, you know, fully maximized, but, you know, we want them to be as good as we can get them. Okay, so now I have all these different pieces. This one's obviously not done yet, but then these two and this one are all set and ready to go. And you can kind of tell too, if I click on this, it's purple, that means they're stretching. That means there's some overlap, it's not laid out correctly. These two are blue, that means those are good to go, okay? Okay, so I'm just going to delete all this other stuff. I don't need that anymore right now. There we go, delete that plane. And I'm just going to use these two as my examples here. So you go there. Oops. There we go. And then you will go also over here. Now again, I would do these at the actual scale of the scene. I would scale these up and fit these into my scene and put them where I want them to go, do the pivot stuff like I did before. For this, I'm just using this as my example, so I don't need to.
What if you wanted it to act like fluff in the scene? You would add that
we would add that in Unreal. Or we would create a sequence of a cloth rendering and then bring that in, but that just complicates it. Definitely possible to do. Cool. So let's say that I want to bring both of these items into Substance together, okay? These are obviously two separate items. We can still bring them in as one. That's not a big deal. Let's say we're texturing them. We want them to have some sort of collaboration together, whatever it is. Their UVs are right on top of each other. So if I go into the UV editor, you'll see that they are on top of each other. Some things like my door, I have a door frame, I have a bottom door, I have a top door, and I might have a bunch of gadgets that are on top of it. I may decide to break my door frame into one texture, my door into another texture, and maybe like other pieces into another texture if I wanted to, okay? But I don't want to bring all of them in separately and then paint them all separately. I want to paint them all at the same time. So you can still do that by doing this little trick, which is assigning a new material. It doesn't matter what it is, it just has to be something different, to one of the pieces. So I just grab this other piece, this top one. I'll just call this top flag or something. And then just for consistency, I will grab this bottom one, assign this to it, and say bottom flag. I don't know what they are. There's random pieces, okay? So now I'm going to save these. Oops, I didn't set my project. Bad boy. There we go. Now I'm going to save my scene, flag pieces. And then I'm going to export this out to Unreal flags. Yes. Okay, all my settings are still saved. I copy my preferences, so I'm good there. And then in Substance, I'm going to go to New and then make sure it's on Unreal. Go to Select, find my flags. I'm going to leave this at 4,000 because that seems to be like a good amount to bring it in at. It's still workable, especially with this lower resolution geometry. And that should have brought something in. Let's try that again. Select flags. Make sure Maya isn't trying to do anything now. 1,000. Okay. Discard. It shouldn't be too small. I'll make it like incredibly big. But it's not even bringing in my textures, which it should be bringing in those two. We'll freeze transform again. We will export the selection again. Flags. Yes. Let's double check. Yeah, FBX 2019. That's good. Geometry. That's fine. There's no animation, no camera. Export. That's fine there. Close, discard, new, Unreal. All right, we'll leave it at 2048 this time. Nope, it's still not bringing in, oh, it's bringing in that. I don't know what that is. It's nothing. Let me check my node editor. P-plane shape. Cut that out. I've never had to do this before, but maybe because of FBX 2019 I have to do it. We shall find out. Yep. Wow, that's so weird. All right, so I'm going to go to Window, Node Editor, and then I'm going to click on one of my pieces of geometry and click this map. And it's exporting this P-plane shape. That's like the original shape that it was. I don't know why it's exporting that out. It shouldn't be, but I'm just going to delete it. And then now I should be able to grab those and export them. It's weird. All right, so there's my two flags. So inside of Substance, on my texture set list, I have a bottom flag now and a top flag. So now Substance has automatically separated these two things into different textures so that I can paint them all at the same time and export them all out at the same time. So I'm going to go to my texture set, yes, bake mesh maps, 4000, use low poly as high. We're not using this ID one yet. We'll get into that in the next assignment. So I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to say bake all texture sets. That means it'll go through and bake the top flag one and then go back and bake the bottom. If you have the latest version of Substance, this window comes up. This is like 2019.2.2. So you can actually see it generating these maps, making it easier for you to obviously visualize it as it's going and not having to wait until the very end. So right now it's doing bottom flag ambient occlusion. You can see the ambient occlusion on that bottom flag happening. Yes, ma'am. Yep, so yeah, it's just display. So it'll actually render fine and go into Unreal fine. It's just because the camera is kind of trying to adjust for the different resolutions. You might get that depending on where you're working. If I click on my select camera here and go to the attribute editor, I change this far clipping plane and the near clipping plane. Basically, you just multiply each one times 10. So I set that one times 10, set this one times 10, and it'll go away. Yep, and that's why. And it's just because the camera in 3D, it has like a cutoff. It doesn't know what to display. If we were to have zoomed out further, they would actually have disappeared. While we're waiting, there we go. So if I go here, you can see how it just disappears. So set that to 10, set that to 10 million or 100,000, whatever it is. I have 2 more things left. Success. Cool. All right, so now I have my maps I can start to work with. Back to my texture set list. Whichever one I'm clicked on, that's the one I'm working on. So if I'm worked on the top flag, anything I do down here in the layers, that's what's going to affect it. So, so far, I've only shown these basic materials. Okay, these are just like starter material type things. There's also things called smart materials, and these use a lot more of the stuff that we just created to create what the texture is going to look like. So if I go into here, and there is a fabric one, there it is, burlap, and I drag this onto that layer, okay, now if we look at it, you see we get like this burlappy like texture, like stretch there. May have to adjust our stuff. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe just hit it from a different angle. Now, if I click on the burlap and I go to my properties for this, oops, there we go. Open the folder first. You'll see that we don't get just one layer. We get like all of these layers. And this is all the stuff that makes that burlap material work. If I go to the base color of this, there it is. And I go to this base color and I give this a different tint, you can see very easily I can change just the color of it pretty quickly. Here's the pattern where that's coming from. So I can click on the color of it. I can click on the mask of it, and you can see here's that weave. And what's neat is that you can actually go into this and you can change the scale and everything. So if I go here into the scale, I can change the scale of what that burlap is looking like. So that area where it was stretched, well, that definitely seems to have fixed that stretchy area. Instead of doing this as a UV projection, I can do a triplanar. Oops, that did look worse. Planar. I think the UV one was the best one. There we go. So we'll leave it at that. You can also rotate it. Obviously, in this case, it doesn't really work, or it doesn't really look good or different. Here are some edges. If any of these you want to play with, click the eyeball off and see what it does. Okay, so you can see that's what that's doing. If I go to surface detail, All these little imperfections, that's what's coming from this one. Here's another one, some bigger surface detail. Here's the pattern that can go away, and then obviously there's the base color. Okay, so very quickly you can create some pretty neat looking textures just using the Smart material combined with your texture set stuff here. And so I'm going to go to bottom flag now, go to this, go to canvas, and we'll just drop this onto that. And there we go. So now this one has a canvasy type of look to it. Oops. And again, I can open the folder, I can go through and dig through where the base color is, give this a little bit of a different tint. Maybe eyedrop that color, make it a little bit darker. There we go. Okay, now, this is like my starting material. Substance is like huge. If you look at any tutorials online, tutorial sets, you'd find probably 8 hours in one set of just like substance basics, and then another 15 hours of substance advanced stuff or intermediate stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do inside here. I'm just going to show a couple things. I'm going to go to a new layer here. Oops, I'm going to click on layer 1 and then go to new layer. And I'm going to go under my particle brushes. And I'm going to do, let's do leaks. There we go. All right, now this is the bottom one. This is called a dynamic brush. And this is one of the cool things about Substance is it's not just like you have to paint everything. You can just like set the stage for what you want things to do, and it will do that. So right now I'm doing this, actually let me get a mask here. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to give this a color. There we go. Let's just color it red for now. And then we'll put a black mask on it. And then I'm going to use this leaks, and I'm just going to click and drag. And what we're going to see is that it's going to simulate what would happen if water were to have leaked on it and got into that spot. So if this is like, you know, this thing leaked onto here, there we go. I can kind of undo that and maybe simulate that a little bit better. It's still thinking. Or it's just floating. Yep, it's floating. I don't know what it's doing there. There we go. Okay, and then I can come over here and obviously pick a better color. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want this to be just a dark. Let's eyedrop this. There we go. And then just darken that some. And you can see that it actually has some shine to it because the roughness is down. So I can pull that up some. And now it's just going to look like a discoloring. Now that's basic leaks, so there's also like leaks heavy, there's also rain. So if I were to click on that, click on the rain, and go here. Now it's going to rain, and it's also going to kind of pool right in the center here, like you would kind of expect. And if you look at it, you can see all the little streaks of water of how it got into this area. So one of the applications they show on their site for using this is, let's say you have an airplane that you're doing and you want it to look like it's flying through like a dust storm. The dust would hit the front of the plane and like do these like streaks back. Well, very easily you can simulate that with Sandstorm, which is right there. Okay, and you can create some very like neat little texture pattern type things. You saw how quick that was. Let me switch to my top flag. Let me make a new fill layer. Oops, fill layer. Let's put a black mask on it. Let's do burn. And again, you can kind of play with these and see. But this one's going to simulate, you know, if there was a fire on here and it burnt upwards, what that would look like. Okay, now it's white because that's the color I chose for this fill layer. If I go into here, I go to my properties, I go to this color. I can give it a whatever color I want and make it look like whatever I'm trying to get it to look like. Now it looks like it's got like sprayed with paint or something. So let's go make this a bit rougher. There we go. And then maybe I'll add another fill layer on top of this. I'll make a black mask. I'll change the color of this layer to maybe black or like a dark, dark red. we go. And then maybe I'll take the amount here and just kind of knock that down some. There we go. Okay, so again, very easily you can create these very complex looking textures. Years ago, we'd actually have to hand paint. Where do we want the weave to be? Where do we want the blood or whatever that is to be on here? And this is going to be a silly one, but this is broken glass. Don't float. Why it's floating. Yeah, the broken glass is not really doing what it usually does. Let's go to burn. Oh, wait, we did that one. Electric lines. Yeah, that's cool. And then fracture. Right? And then you can control all the settings for each one of these. Like that brush has settings that you can control how long that brush does what it does. Let's set this on screen. Let's set this to 9% or something. There we go. That's kind of cool. All right, so then from here it's the same process. Export out my textures, save them into my folder, bring them into Unreal, and Unreal will have the two models separate. I'll make new materials for each and assign each one to them. Okay, so that process is the same. This is where my scene is currently at. You'll see I put the hologram on there. I'll show that with some glass stuff. I have my door at the end, and my door opens. I don't know what that flicker was. It's kind of weird. And then when I go in there, whoop, I'm on the other side. So I just have him transport to the other side, which is just over there. Okay. So all the other stuff, how to bring it in, that's all the same. Every single thing is the same as far as that goes. Some things you may have to update are up here. These are your different snapping things. Whenever you grab any item inside of Unreal, like this cube, and you start moving it, it's snapping. Even though we can't see that it's snapping, it is snapping to something. Depending on what numbers you have here, that's what it's going to snap to. So you can see there it's snapping to 100. Here it's snapping to 50. I lowered mine to 5 because the items that I was trying to get lined up needed to be that incremental. Okay? You could obviously turn this off too, but you really want to keep it on because you're creating these modules that will basically, or should, line up perfectly. There's also rotational snapping that's happening. And again, you can change that number. And there's also scaling stuff that's happening too that, again, you could modify if you needed to. Okay? You can see down here all of my, all the different materials that I brought in, and all the different textures. Here's all the materials that I created. Let's go into the screen one and take a look at how I did that one. And you'll see it's not much different than everything else, okay? So on my screen, I had the UVs set up. So I didn't take this into Substance. I just looked at the UVs where they were lined up. And then I went into Photoshop and I made an image of there's my UV facing this way. And because the screen on the opposite side was facing the other direction, I needed to flip the UVs here. So I flipped that image. So this is going to go into my base color. I'll get to the rest of that stuff in a second. Down here, this is my opacity. So I created an opacity map where it was white where I don't want to see it, and it was black where I do want to see it, or vice versa. It's white where I do want to see it. Yes, it's white where I do want to see it. I had to switch that because it was backwards. Okay, and then black where I don't want to see it. And this is just Photoshop, just going in there and just playing with the colors to get white where I do want to see it and black where I don't. Now, I had to go onto this material here and change this from being, change this from being an opaque item to a translucent item. And what that does is it makes it transparent, so then we can see through that object. Now, when that happens, you'll see that we lose things like metallic, specular, and roughness. Then I can play with opacity. So before I did that, opacity didn't show up. I go back to opaque, opacity is locked out. I can still connect stuff to it, it just doesn't show up. Change this back to translucent, now opacity is there. Okay. Now I needed to create a refraction. This is what gives it the glassy look. So it looks like it's kind of distorting it as we're looking around. So if you type it, if you hold 1, 2, or 3 and you click, that will create a value. It's either a 1-digit value, a 2-digit value, or a 3-digit value, depending on which number. This refraction is a number, 1 is like no distortion at all. So think of like just a plain sheet of glass looking straight through it with no distortion. If you went to something like, I'm going to click over here, like 2.7, that's very distorted. If I were to drag this into here, and then I said, please update. My video card just doesn't like to have all these applications open. There we go. We can't really see a huge difference, but it definitely is there. Like you can see it happening in the background. Okay. If I go to this 1.25, watch the tree in the background, we should get less. Let's hit apply again. We're going to get less distortion. Okay, so I played with numbers and 1.25 seemed to be a good number. Okay, so that had to get piped into this refraction. The other stuff that I have here, this other mess of craziness, is for this emissive color. Okay, so I wanted to have this item obviously emit a color, and I didn't want this to be this ugly green color. Okay, or it's actually, yeah, green color. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my original color and I'm creating an add node. Every node that we create, we just hit, where's it at? Right click and then go to add, and then I clicked add. And what this is doing is it's taking my original color values and then adding this to 1. So this actually is just making this a bit brighter. That's all it's doing. If it was black in this view, it's making it white. Okay. This is the color that the screens are going to be. So this is multiplying this color times this value of 3. That way it'll be 3 times brighter than this color. Now I could have gone into this color here and gone to the value and typed in, let's say, 5. But it's misleading to someone. They don't know what color is actually there. If I give them the color, say it's multiplied times 3, it's very obvious what's happening. And then this is being multiplied times this color to darken it. So in these dark spots, it's just getting rid of any of the color information there. So it's not bleeding through. And then right here, this image is being multiplied into that. Now this is very complex for, you know, your first go at this kind of thing if you want to do it. You can basically just take this color and leave it on color. And then under emissive, you could just connect it right to that color there. And as long as you have your opacity, everything will work. It's when you start to say, I want this to be brighter or more glowy or whatever, then that's when you're starting to add in these other multiplies and whatever else. Okay. Now if I go in here to this one and I change this number and then hit apply again, this should be 20 times or 7 times brighter than it was, giving me more glow inside my scene. Okay, so that's what that number does there. So then I saved and then I closed. Okay, so that's something you might have in yours. You might not have it in yours. Okay, so that's the only difference with that specific one there. Now how I did my door animation. Let's go back to this, let's go back to geometry, and let's go to BP door. Okay. I don't know what that display issue is. So I brought in my door like regular. This is what's going to make it all work. Okay. Now again, this looks complex. I'm going to break it down so that it's a little bit simpler. But this is all separate pieces. Because of how my door was set up, the door frame is one piece. And then this door is one piece, and then this door is one piece. Okay? So I imported my stuff, textured it like normal. Okay, so blueprint class, actor, BP door 2. I'm going to open that up. Find my door pieces. There's door, door, door. Okay. I made my material, so I'll just choose from here my door frame. grab both of these, go in here to door, there's that. All right. And then that's it as far as like getting the look of this. I'm going to go to the event graph. And this is where you're able to trigger things. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to say, when our character does this, I want this to happen. Okay, so when the character gets close to the door, I want something to happen. So I'm going to set this aside for a second. And I need to have some way to trigger or to figure out when the character is close to the door. Oops. Let me jump back into my scene real quick. Oh, those things are super bright now. Look at that. Ooh. All right, so there's my door right there. And, come on. You can't see it, but there's actually like a box that's around this thing. And when the character gets by that box, that's what's going to trigger it, okay? So I'm going to create that box back in my viewport. So I'm going to go to Add Component, and I'm going to say, not trigger, it's collision. So I'm going to go to Box Collision. And this, I'm going to scale up. And that's going to be the area where my character walks in there. When he goes inside the box, that's what's going to trigger the door opening. So this is where in video games, the closer this is to the door would affect when it opens. I'm sure if you play video games before, sometimes you walk right up against the door. It doesn't open. You have to like get to a certain spot, or you have to be right on top of it before it opens. There's no like lead time. If I had this super big, the door would basically open up as he's like walking down the hall. That way you can like, run from one room to the next without having to stop and wait for the door to open. All right, so we're just going to leave it right there. So now we have this box. I'm going to pull it out of there. I'm not sure why it's in there. Attach. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go back to my event graph. I'm going to go back to my box, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to add an event. So I'm going to say add on component begin overlap. So when my character is overlapping the box, there it is. What do I want to do? Now, it looks, again, complex. We're only using some things here. This is the direction. So think of Nuke. We have like that node graph where it goes from one spot to the next to the next. This is like the order that stuff happens. So this is like, okay, on begin overlap, what do you want to do? So I'm going to go to timeline. Okay. So when the character overlaps, I want to go into this timeline, and I want something to happen in the timeline. I'm going to double click, and this will open up just a timeline for us to create values. I'm going to go here. I'm going to type in open door. And this is seconds. This is value. Okay, so I'm just going to, I think it's control click. Just right click, there we go, add key there. I'll go up to 0.5, add a key there. And then I'm just going to change these. Now I don't know how far I want the doors to open. Okay, think of like doors rotating, it's pretty obvious, typically like 90 degrees. But my door, I'm not sure how far this would actually move. So I'm going to look at my values here, and I'm going to drag and move it to about there. So this is 165. So I'm going to assume that this one would be negative 165. Yep, pretty close. So it's going to go to 0.5 is how long I want it to take to open. It's going to go to 165. And then it's going to start at 0 and 0. Now I can't see the stuff, so I'm just going to frame these like that. There we go. And I'll leave it just like that. So I'm just going to compile this. I'm going to save that and jump back here. Okay. So now when the character overlaps the box, it's going to play the timeline. Now what's going to happen? I need to update my stuff. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say set, oops, come on, set relative transform. That's what I want. Set relative transform of what item? Okay, so I have door, door, door. Let me rename these real quick so I know what's what. This one is the door. So I'll rename this. Right door. Click this one. Left door. And then we should rename that one too. Door frame. All right, so back to this. Back to that. Set actor. Oops. Set relative transform. There we go. And I want this to go to the left door. Okay. Now this will automatically connect this. So it has to know what is it doing, and it has to know what item is it doing it to. So right now it's doing it to the left door. And then it says, okay, now where are you moving this to? Okay, so this I need to connect to that. Now this is one value, that's what we set up here. This needs 3 values. So I'm going to take this down here, and I'm going to go to, I always forget what this is called. Let me scoot this guy over there. Let me open up my other door real quick. And make vector, there we go, that's what it's called. So I'm going to drag this here, I'm going to say make vector. And then what this does is it connects this one value to here, and then I can return this to there. Okay, so now let's see if this works. Save, yes. There we go. Just minimize that. I'm going to drag my new BP door into this area. I'll hit play. So there's my new door. As I walk by it, oh, and the one side opened. Now I can't get in. Oh, there it goes. I got in. All right, so obviously I need to close it. That's kind of stupid how it's not closing. And then I have to do the other stuff to it. So let's go back to our door. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the right door. Okay, so this is saying, okay, begin overlap, do your timeline, and then set the relative location. Now I need to do the same thing. I need to do a set relative location for the other door, which would be the right door. Whoops. Come on, just move out of the way. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to set this same value to this one, and then we're going to have to fix it because it's wrong. So just set you there, hit play. Okay, I don't need to redrop it in, it's automatically there. So I move over here, and you can see what happened. The whole thing shifted off to the side. So one door needs to go positive, one door needs to go negative, okay? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to make another make vector. Tor, there we go. And I'm going to do a multiply. Float times, there we go, float times a float. So I'm going to drag this onto here. What? You're a float, yes. You go onto there. There we go. And then you will go onto the X, and then you will go onto there. Now I'm going to multiply this times -1, and then I'll save it. And then it automatically updates, so all I have to do is come in here, both doors open. Okay? Now, to get them to close, this part is pretty simple. So I'm going to go back to my box, I'm going to go to add event, and I'm going to say on component end overlap. Okay, so this is beginning overlap, this is end overlap, and all I have to do is drag this to reverse. And what that does, it just rewinds the animation. Okay, so we don't have to do anything fancy, just reverse it. So play, go here, doors open, move away from it, doors close. Doors open, close. I don't know what that flickering is. Sweet. Okay, so that's all that. Now I think in this one I did something a little bit different. Oops, no, that is it. Yep, that. Yeah, and this one it was kind of weird where it made this. Or my new one didn't do that, did it? No. It just connected right to it. Very odd. But it works, so that is all that matters. Now, to get him to transport, I'm not going to go over that because there's like a 6-minute video on YouTube where you can watch how to make someone transport. I just have to, oops, not there, not there. I open the door. I'm going to go inside here. I'll zoom out a smidge. There we go. So inside here, there's a trigger. And what happens is when the character hits that trigger, not there. There it is. When the character hits this trigger, it does the same thing. So instead of us setting the doors translates here and here, it actually translates the actor all the way to the other side of the screen. Okay? So that was just another thing that I set up. If I edit my trigger box, good. Let me know later. Oh, it wasn't there. It was on my blueprint, and it was on my level blueprint. There it is. So on the characters overlapping the trigger box, we're just teleporting the character to a brand new location. Okay, so much less stuff there, but it still works. And I gave I put a little box inside the scene so that I wouldn't see, when the door opens, there's like nothing there. I didn't want that, so I put, this box here. And then I didn't want the character turning around because on the other side of my door I have nothing. So you would see like that where you can like see through the walls, which is kind of weird. So that's why he teleports so we can never see on the other side. Okay. Other stuff that I did, building my lighting. So there is under my under my blueprint settings, there it is. Under my settings, under the engine scalability settings, it was set to low. There we go. So that when I hit play, it looked pretty horrible and grainy. Actually, it wasn't probably low because I couldn't see anything. It was probably set to like medium. Okay, so you can see it looks pretty horrible. But if I set my settings to epic or cinematic, I get much higher quality settings. Same thing with my material level. I can change that up to high. You want to build your lighting. So what this will do is it's going to bake in all the lights that are there. So if you add lights to your scene, it'll lock all that information in. So that way it's only updating what's changing for our character. As he's walking through the scene and we see his shadow moving, it's only using his shadow on the items. It's not calculating the shadow from this thing onto here because we don't need that. This is going to take a minute, and this is compiling shaders. I'm going to hit stop build, if I won't listen to me. But I would do the build, and then obviously as you're playing it, you can see what the detail is, see what the quality level is. On some of my materials, I did want us to adjust some of the reflections, some of the metalness, some of the roughness on it. So I did use some fancier stuff on these things. I shouldn't have hit stop because it's just like stuck there now. 1 minute. You're still counting. That's fine. No, it's just going to be stuck there thinking about what it's going to do. Okay. For your turn-in for this one, I didn't go through the sheet yet. I'll go through that next class if you have time. You're going to turn in your whole project folder for this. So it'll be your Unreal environment so that I can basically hit play and play it and walk around. And then we'll also do some screenshots of different areas, okay, in gameplay. This isn't going to do this apparently. I think it's because I have so much stuff going on that it just doesn't like that. Let's see, these are my drapes. What did I call these again? Was it? Yep. Flags, that's right. It was so long ago. Close that. There we go. All right, so now it's back. Just wait for that to respond. If I go back to here, go back to my materials. And I believe my ceiling pipes. No, that wasn't it. Oh, ceiling right there next to it. I wanted to adjust some of these settings, so I did add some multipliers into this. So I took my metallic that was coming through, and basically my ceiling was like super reflective. So I wanted to just lower it. Instead of going back into substance, I just took the metal channel, put it onto this multiplier, and then connected it. And that way I can control that amount of metalness through this. So if it was coming up at 1, I multiply it times 0.15 and it drops it down tremendously. Or if I needed to make it bigger, I could type in 5 and it'll obviously be a lot bigger, a lot more reflective. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I did specifically. Oh, that was the other thing. All right, so you can see some of these effects that I have here where I got this lens flare happening. In your outliner area here, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can play with. One of them is post-process volume. And inside here, you can play with a bunch of different settings to turn things on, turn things off. So one of them is, if I go under lens flare, you can turn on lens flares, and then you can control how much lens flare you get. You can also turn on bloom, and then again, control how much bloom you get. There we go. Okay, so obviously 20 is too much. I'm really getting some blown out stuff here. And then the threshold is like what's going to bloom. So if I turn that off, everything's blooming. If I lower it, obviously I hit the right spot. There's also depth of field you can play with. There's also exposure, chromatic aberration, dirt masks, camera stuff. I'm not going to get into all of it. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can actually look at in here to tweak what the end image is going to look like. What's there? One. Ray tracing. Yeah, motion blur's on there. There you go. Saturation. Kind of desaturate everything. -1. Yeah, no. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just didn't click the right button. But if you know where that is, then you can start playing with some of the stuff. Oh, this is mobile tone mapper. This isn't mobile. That's why. Global saturation. There we go. And then gamma. We can turn that on. It looks like they're all like grayed out, but they're not. There we go. So now I've just created a black and white video of my version game. Cool.
Can you make it flash red?
Flash red? Probably. I don't know how. I don't think these you can keyframe. But I could add a light to my character that would actually, or my camera, that would like flash colors if I was moving around. What was that? All right, so I'll leave the lecturing as far as what we're going to be doing. Like, that's it for this assignment. Our next assignment we're going to do in the class